one is obviously respect and wanting that to be a mutual thing. The other is when you said, I want your authentic self, wanting your employees to bring themselves to work and not just step into the role of a number or a cog on a wheel. And then third, your insatiable curiosity is so pervasive throughout everything that you just shared. And really that's a secret to interacting with neurodivergent people. Respect, insatiable curiosity. I love that. Yeah. And kudos to you for managing that way.
Well, thank you.
Welcome back to another episode of Living With FASD. I'm your host, Patti Kasper, and today is another episode in the series that explores how different challenges show up across different types of neurodiversity. And today I'm bringing you Kyle Perkins, who I met through LinkedIn, such a wonderful organization for all of us neurodiverse peeps to meet up and get together. And let me just say, he gets me. Even though it's not FASD, is not his wheelhouse, he's going to be talking a lot from the framework of ADHD, but he's got a lot for each of you to really appreciate. So Kyle, thank you so much for joining me today on Living with FASD. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, Patty. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So, we were chatting a few minutes before we got started, and I'm not the only one who came to appreciate all the ins and outs of what it means to be wired a little bit differently until definitely into adulthood. Can you share a little bit about your story?
Sure thing. So officially, I was diagnosed with ADD back when I was 7, back when there was a distinction between ADD and ADHD. My parents didn't really like that, and they didn't really understand what it meant. They just thought it was a label, and being of their generation, labels really weren't a thing. They were more of a bad omen, and to them, they didn't really understand what it meant. So for the longest time, a good 25-ish years, I just kept putting it off. I thought, okay, well, it's just part of me. I don't know what it means, but it's just there. And as I started learning more about ADHD through communities and forums and posts and everything else, I realized a lot of this does resonate with me. And so what if I were to dive into this deeper? Because back when I was younger, you had ADD, which was just, the attention deficit disorder, and then the attention deficit hyperactive disorder. And I always thought the hyperactivity meant you were bouncing off the walls continuously.
Right. And I had a similar thing in mind. I was 56 when I started learning about FASD and recognizing myself in the list of challenges and consequences. And after that, I started thinking, wow, ADHD, I'm reading more and more about how it presents so differently in women than it does in men. And because I too was thinking about little boys bouncing off the walls. And even though I have a master's in psych, go figure. But, when I got that degree, it was still back when we differentiated ADD versus ADHD. And I mentioned that to a coworker and she started laughing, like belly roll laughing. She said, I've known you had ADHD since the moment I met you, and it probably 10 years ago at this point. And, and I'm just really reading everything you put out because it's like, yes, I'm having a parallel experience as I did when I started diving into FASD. So when did you start stepping out into the advocacy space, really educating people about ADHD?
That was actually pretty recently. When I was on Facebook, I was a part of all these different ADHD groups that would, post different things and give advice and do all this stuff. But I realized either a lot of it was just bots or a lot of it was, well, people really don't know what's going on. So you're just kind of saying everyone has it. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way to do this. And the more that I looked into the different forums and the groups, I realized a lot of these people that give advice really don't have ADHD and they're just trying to give textbook definitions. So why don't I try to just start something and take some of the same concepts, same ideas, and post it in an area that people really don't post about in that form.
Yeah.
So I started taking the same concepts and putting it on LinkedIn about October or November of last year. And honestly, my previous LinkedIn engagement would go from about 1,000 pages or sorry, 1,000 views a week. And the more that I started posting, the more engagement I was getting. And before I
Mm-hmm.
knew it, in about 2 months, I had almost 500,000 views. I mean, it just
Wow. Yeah,
shot up
you've
like
really
crazy.
blown up.
And so just seeing people engage and being more accepting of that information from someone who actually has it, to me,
Yeah.
has been very beneficial. So far, every single person, aside from two, that has made a comment on the posts has been very supportive. Only two
Mm-hmm.
people have said, how dare you do that? You shouldn't say that. People are going to get the wrong idea. And I'm like, look, I'm just
Wow.
sharing information, so I'm going to keep doing it, and you keep doing you.
Yeah. 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 What else can you do? I mean, there's haters in every crowd.
Hmm.
So well done not giving them any more attention than that. So one of the things I like to explore is what do we have in common between the various neurodivergent subgroups, right? Do you find that you get much interaction with the autistic community or traumatic brain injury or any of the other umpteen different causes of neurodiversity?
Yes, actually, in a few ways. As part of my research, I also dove deeper into the autistic spectrum.
Mm.
And once I realized that a lot of the different traits I could resonate with, I realized that I wasn't just ADHD, I was all ADHD.
Okay.
And one thing that I didn't expect was the ability to actually self identify with that because my
Yeah.
mother actually has a degree in special education and she taught special education for years, but
Okay.
she was still on the old 1970s definition and
Yeah.
she didn't really understand the whole spectrum aspect. So when she
Yeah.
saw it actually come out in her own son, she was in denial for the longest time. And actually what she wouldn't even talk to me about it. It was just so strange.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
honestly, I'm like, hey, this is who I am. I do these things. I act this way. I don't understand why, but I understand
Mm.
better. Honestly, through the various posts that I've made, I've also made a lot of connections into other aspects, including people with other, let's just say, self-identifying solutions, such as
Okay.
OCD. I actually
Mhm.
have a talk with a few people who've had OCD and said, hey, I appreciate what you're doing. Can I just talk to you and show you my story and get some feedback and what's going on? And I'm like, sure, I'm all ears. And
Yeah.
so far, I've had 3 meetings in the past month with people like that. In fact, I have
Okay.
an interview coming up with a certain person who recently got diagnosed last year, and he's not quite sure exactly what to do and just wants some outside
Yeah.
advice.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's one thing where community becomes so important and becomes so vital for us as with living experience to be present and available really makes a difference in quality of life for so many people, I think. Yeah. And making everything much more accessible and much more palatable, thinking of your mom and my mom, my mother won't at all discuss the alcohol use. She and I showed her my book because, what daughter doesn't want mom to be proud of the book she wrote, right? And she looked at it for about 15 seconds and that was that. And it's not about blame at all because, in the 60s nobody knew any better, but it's difficult. And especially, I know with autism there's still that element of blame for vaccines or whatever that parents can feel like, "Oh, did I make a right choice? Did I harm my child accidentally or not?" There's a lot of shame, isn't there?
There
That
is,
doesn't
unfortunately.
that doesn't need to be there. Yeah. Yeah, and it doesn't need to be there in our community either, the FASD community, because, the vast majority of women, probably 90 some percent, will make every conceivable lifestyle change once they know that there's a pregnancy, but by then it's too late.
Mhm.
Yeah. So the characteristics that you have in common with the autism community and the ADHD community, were there with those whom you know who do not have both, are there any things that has surprised like the ASD only group? Is there anything that surprises them about how you navigate life or the things you experience?
Yes and no. Unfortunately, a lot of the different solutions that people come up with only fit them, and the solutions that I found only fit me. So all I can do is just share my own experiences. But
Yes.
from what I've
Yeah.
seen, a lot of people that are on the ASD spectrum or are just ADHD and not on the other one, they definitely find that do overlap greatly from my own experiences being able to say that yes, the two are separate, but they do overlap. In fact, one of my posts talked about that is just the idea of, hey, we're not so dissimilar. In fact, we have a
Yeah.
lot more in common. And once I
Yeah.
start going through my own experiences, they say, oh, that's kind of me too.
Yeah.
And as soon as I
Yeah.
say that I use an AI based task software. I also
Mhm.
try to use the timer method, which may or may not work. I try to break things down into smaller groups so it's not just one big overwhelming task and just a
Mhm.
bunch of other different smaller things that work for me. Maybe it'll work for them too, maybe not. But
Yeah.
again, they have to
Yeah.
figure out what works for them.
Well, accommodations do need to be tailored, right? Because, I frequently say that a person's combination of strengths and challenges and learning style preferences is as unique to them as their fingerprint.
Yes,
And so accommodations or workarounds do have to be tailored by each individual for each individual. But I really find there's a lot of overlap with FASD and both ASD and ADHD that a lot of people aren't aware of. In fact, the diagnostic rate for FASD is an abysmal 0.01, according to one of the papers that I was used in my research for Sit by Sit, my book. The authors gave thanks to the 99.90% of people with FASD who were undiagnosed. Yet we are assessed more often than we are diagnosed. So most of the times when there's an assessment, their parents are sent away with their child in tow saying, oh yeah, your kid's got problems, but it's not alcohol related. There's no face, right? And there's nothing we can point to with the psychological testing, the cognitive testing. But those scattered findings are the findings. That is the pattern for FASD. But most of the time, there's either a partial diagnosis because of the comorbidities. In other words, that person does have autism or does have ADHD, but also has FASD, and that part remains undiagnosed, or it's just a complete misdiagnosis. And that's most of the kids. So it's tough.
it is, especially in the ADHD world where getting a diagnosis is not as easy as just walking into your doctor's office and saying, hey, I think I have it. And you walk out with a diagnosis.
And a
So,
bag of meds.
yes.
Yeah.
And
It
that's a
does
whole different
seem
story.
Yeah, I do think that that's an element, right? And I think that's part of why your mom and my parents, were like labels
Hmm.
because of that past history of, just trying to fix everything with a pill.
Hmm.
I remember reading Dr. Ammon's work, or Ammon. I don't know how to say his name. He's Daniel Amen. He's out of California. His ADHD research found he uses PET scans, which are not accessible for the most part because insurance doesn't like paying for them. They're ridiculously expensive. But his research found that there are 6 types of ADHD. Not all of them respond to various meds. And that's why doctors try this med, then that one, then the other one. They start with what they're most familiar with and then they kind of move on. Eventually, something will click with whatever type of ADHD, whatever brain region where it seems to be centered in. But not all of them respond to meds. Some, it's just lifestyle changes and accommodations.
Totally agree. I mean, my wife actually has a more extreme case of ADHD, and she's been, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 different types of meds because, again, you never know what does and doesn't work.
So you listed a couple workarounds a few minutes ago and, breaking things down into smaller chunks. Learning how to chunk things is very helpful. And that's definitely one of the go-to accommodations for FASD. But one I'm really curious about, I'm hoping you'll talk about is the AI.
Mhm.
Tell me more about that.
Sure. So one of the things that I always struggled with was task management. Now, I could write all my tasks in my notebook, not a problem. I could put them into the Google Task Manager or put it into the Apple reminders things. But one thing that I always found out was if the day got away from me, which it often does,
Mm-hmm.
then the task that was assigned for that day just goes away, becomes a silent reminder that I see for days and days and days. And to me, that just wasn't serving the purpose, especially if I wrote it in a notebook, in which case it would be on that one page and then I'm, 10 pages in and that task disappears. So one thing that I found is an app called Motion, and that actually allows you to put in a task, assume how long it's going to take, such as 15, 30, 45 minutes, etc. And then it will prioritize the task and put it on your calendar between all your events. And if the task
Okay.
is not done that day, then it moves to the next day.
I
You can
love
set it,
that.
and you can set it for either during the work days, so such as say, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, or if you want it to be a weekend task, you can do
Yeah.
that, or set it to a nighttime task. And to me, just seeing all those tasks, one, not just pile up, but be prioritized, and two,
Yeah.
fit around my schedule so I don't have to do it, to
Yeah.
me has been a great lifesaver instead of me having to do all the manual work to figure it out.
No kidding. So that's motion with an N or notion with an N.
Motion with
Notion
an
like idea or M as in doing it.
motion with an M.
Okay.
The site is usemotion.app.
So there's I've spoken for years with people, as a foster care social worker. Foster parents are so incredibly busy, not only their own day to day, but also all the extra appointments that come with caring for kids with complicated backgrounds. And so, if things start getting messy or out of hand with the house, as happens even with my own home, there's an app called flylady.com that when I used it even half-heartedly was like fantastic. And it's still on my phone and I never ever go there, right? And I tried putting on my own calendar like twice a week at 8 o'clock in the morning, dust.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, never happens. So I'm going to try this app. I think I'm going to give it a go.
Absolutely.
There was, do you subscribe to the ADHD magazine or something? It's from a LinkedIn group.
I'm
They
part
have
of a few of them.
webinars, huh?
I'm part of a few of them, so I'm not quite sure specifically which one you're talking about.
Yeah, they have webinars like once a month or twice a month. And there was one that piqued my interest, but not enough to get me into the webinar. But it was on why apps don't work for the ADHD brain. And I was very curious about that, but I haven't gone there yet. But I imagine that answer, whatever they proposed, is probably going to explain things for many more people than just those with ADHD.
Certainly
So,
hope so.
yeah. And I know the stats are anywhere from 50 to 70% of us with FASD also have ADHD. What are some of the other things that you have found to be especially helpful?
Well, honestly, it's really down to motivation. To give a good example, over the past, what is this, February?
Mhm.
Past year or so, I've been actually working on revamping one of my books. I wrote a few about 10-ish years ago, learned kind of the process, and now I'm learning the formal process for it. But obviously, going through, a 300 to 400 page book every single week, it's extremely exhausting. But
Mhm.
one thing that I found out for me, just breaking it down into smaller chunks, is if I can just work on one paragraph for 2 minutes,
Okay.
that's all that needs to happen. Just 2 minutes, sit down, one paragraph. If I get through
Mhm.
that, I can call it a day. But
Okay.
usually, once I start getting into it, that's when the hyper focus happens, and then I can get 3 or
Yeah.
4 hours in, and next thing you know, I have
Yeah.
10 chapters done. But for me,
And
being
you
able,
have a whole lot of things getting moved on your schedule to the next
yes,
day.
good
Yeah.
and bad thing, yes. But just being able to get that smaller task done
Yeah.
and have that sense of accomplishment. Now, of
Yeah.
course, the whole dopamine level is messed up as it is, but just being able to dive into something that I wanted to do versus the typical workday, which requires a whole different set of skill sets, shall I say,
Mhm.
definitely helped me out in being able to say, if I can just get started for 2 minutes. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I'll be
Mhm.
like, I'm just not here right now and I need to do something else to be motivated or take a nap
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
doom scroll for, an hour.
Yeah. I can relate to that. So you're an author.
Yes.
What do you want to share some of what you've written with us so that we can highlight it for you and maybe get a few more purchases for you?
Well, I won't go into my previous series because that was definitely a learning experience. But the one that I'm working on now, long story short, it is a fantasy novel where it's kind of
Okay.
like Hunger Games meets Harry Potter, but in the most anti-trope way possible.
Okay.
I have the fifth version of the manuscript being worked on, and I have until my birthday at the end of this month to get it done so I can submit it to agents and be accepted by an agent and get that submitted to publishers. So I'll definitely have more
Okay.
details when that comes out.
Okay. What a wonderful birthday present that will be to
I certainly
yourself.
hope so.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also learned as I went through the multiple versions of my manuscripts that one of the things that really needs to be out there is an ADHD book by people with ADHD. And
Mhm.
so, using my own experiences in the business world, I have a lot of different business books. In fact, this whole entire bookshelf behind me is nothing but business books. One of the ones that stuck out with me was the E Myth Revisited. And it goes through a story based format of a consultant talking to a business owner who wants to grow her business. And it talks about the technician role, the manager role, and the entrepreneur role. And long story short, it just goes into talking about those different roles and the aspects of running and owning a business. And I
Mhm.
thought, why not take the same concept, but apply it to the ADHD world and be able to
Yeah.
say, hey, this is actually written by someone with ADHD who actually
Yeah.
knows what can be done, different
Yeah.
experiences, and being more educational for those without it. And so
Yeah.
that one I'm working on as soon as I have the fiction one done. But that
Yeah.
one is going to be called the NT myth,
Okay.
specifically targeted towards neurotypical people to say, hey,
Okay.
neurodivergence isn't a bad thing. It's just
Right.
we work differently, and here's a guide to help working with us made easier.
Right.
And
Yeah.
on the other hand, if people with ADHD want to read it, which by all means I encourage, not just for sales, but for education,
Yeah.
then it also should help bridge the neurodivergent world with
Yeah.
neurotypical and say, here are some
Yeah.
landmines to watch out for. Here's what
Yeah.
people are actually saying. Here are the secret rules of society no one tells you about.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Now, business. You
Mhm.
are a business owner.
Yes,
Yeah. Tell me about that journey.
that
What
journey. Oh, where to begin?
Right. Well, I mean, because so many of us, from not understanding ourselves and what makes us tick and how to most utilize our strengths while minimizing our challenges, right?
Mhm.
We tend to have winding paths in terms of our occupation, right? So how did you end up with the company that you have and what has that journey been like for you?
Well, I am no exception to the winding path. Honestly, when I was in high school, there's a point to all this, I promise. When I was in high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. But I joined an HTML course back when they offered those. And I really just kind of took to the concept of programming and understanding the language and getting into other programming languages and understanding the logic behind it. And it was actually very enjoyable.
Mhm.
And so I tried to learn as much as possible about C++, Visual Basic, HTML, CSS, all that stuff around 2000.
Yep.
And my plan, again, young, naive high schooler, was I'm going to build the next Google or the next Facebook. I'm going to have this great company and build websites for people and do all this stuff. Well, I left high school, went into college, and the first thing I did was start my first business, which was, of course, building websites. And I ran that very stubbornly for about 8 years. And through all of my college experience, getting a degree in entrepreneurship that helped me learn how to start the business, not necessarily how to run it. That's a whole different story. And once I got out of college, my pure focus was running the business. But
Mhm.
I also did everything. And because I did everything, I couldn't work on the business to grow it. And that's one of the biggest
Yeah.
lessons that I learned from E-Myth Revisited is to work on the
Yeah.
business as an owner, not in the business.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
during that whole process of running the business, or at least working from the inside out, I learned a lot of what not to do and a lot of what to do. I just couldn't
Mm-hmm.
implement it fast.
Yeah.
So I made the official decision to close that. I then worked at a community college to teach computer science, basic computer science. I also dealt cards at a casino in the mountains of North Carolina. That was a
Right on.
very, very fun job, great pay. Don't really miss the customers. That's a whole different story. Then
One that's easy to imagine, though.
honestly, the job itself is very fun and very fast paced. I like the fact
Yeah.
that you are able to have like all the microtransactions and the tasks to be repeated and completed. I mean, very
Mm-hmm.
ADHD friendly.
Yeah.
But then after that, my wife decided that she really didn't want to stay in the mountains of North Carolina. And she
Mm-hmm.
made this wild decision and said, I want to apply overseas. And so she did. And in 2018 in March, 2016 in March, she applied for a company in Japan to teach English. They said yes.
Okay.
And they said, we want you out here in 2 weeks. Yeah. So I honestly didn't know what to do because I'm like, well, we still have the cats and I still have to finish up my teaching contract and have to do all this and get the house ready and stuff. She left, and for 6 months I was alone. And
Yeah.
I had to figure out all the processes, which I, hyper focused on and got all the research done in like 3 days, but had to get that underway and figure out
Good.
exactly what to do to get
Yeah.
myself over there because,
Yeah.
well, things had to finish up here. So
Yeah.
I applied with the same company, got a similar job, and flew
Yeah.
out there in September with the cats in tow and a bunch of luggage.
Yeah.
And for 2 years, we actually spent a good amount of time in Japan teaching
Okay.
English to elementary and middle school students. And that definitely taught me how to break out of my shell. I mean, prior to that, in the programming world, love to be the introvert. I would love to just be by myself in a room, coding away, seeing what I can actually create from nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I didn't have that opportunity while teaching English because, well,
Yeah.
I hate to say it, Japan is a very advanced tech country, but they
Yeah.
do so many things that are stuck in the 90s. That's all of a story. So the only thing that I can do is break out of my shell. I mean, I'm around
Mm-hmm.
6-year-olds. They don't take
Yeah.
well to lectures. They don't take well to a
Yeah.
foreign language. They need interactivity. They need,
Yeah.
the hyperness. They need the games. They need the fun.
Yeah.
And in 2018, we decided, okay, we had enough of that and we're going to fly back to the States. And during that time, we had a business partner who was very interested in working with us, and he got involved with the franchise consultant. And the franchise consultant interviewed my wife and I, and she said, okay, out of all the franchises that we have, based on what you like and what your interests are, I have three options. The first is a coffee and tea house. We said, probably not because we're not really coffee and tea drinkers and we kind of want to, have a business that we enjoy.
Yeah.
The second one is, for lack of a better phrase, an assisted yoga studio. I won't go
Okay.
into the names, but they are quite populous in the area right now. And
Mm.
the third one was a custom t-shirt shop, which
Okay.
the franchise consultant thought was the best of all three and said between my tech background and her creativity, this would be a great fit. And I said, you're absolutely crazy. I mean, who in their right mind would go into a retail store and say, hey, I want to, design a t-shirt and then pay for it and get it when they can just do it online from the comfort of their couch? Well, after doing the research and contacting all three franchises and diving into the owner's stories and the owner benefits and everything else when it comes to a franchise, out of the three, the t-shirt company won. And so we
Okay.
officially met with the owners of Big Frog Franchise Group and we said, okay, if we get into this, what are you limiting? What are your restrictions? What exactly are you expecting from us?
Yeah.
And they were nothing but helpful. They had nothing but good stories. They said pretty much as long as you don't slander the brand name, you paint the store the correct colors, and you use our systems, everything
Yeah.
else is up to you,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
kind of nice for flexibility, but also its own challenge in its own way. And
Yeah.
through getting the franchise agreements and getting the store up and going in September of 2018 and officially opening in October 2018, we learned more about the custom garment industry and how the different technologies have greatly advanced over the past 50 plus years,
Mm.
where
Mhm.
instead of having, say, you want a picture on a shirt, instead of having to separate the colors and burn the films and create the screens and put it through the big machines and dry it and everything else takes, a team of like 5 people in 5 days. Instead, there's this large printer you can get. Specifically, the one we have is called the Brother GTX, and it
Mm.
works just like a standard in-house printer, but on a commercial scale. And it can print up to 16 million colors on a shirt. So no need for
Wow.
separating colors or screens or anything else. You want a whole entire photograph in a shirt, load it up,
Yeah.
put it in, print it, 2 minutes, done.
Wow. Okay.
The more that we learned about the industry, the business, the technology, the skill sets, my wife and I went in with two foundations. One, it had to be a business that we knew nothing about, so we
Mm.
couldn't just take it over, again, working on the business, not in the business.
Right.
And two, our goal is to work on it. So we have employees. The employees do a very good job of running the sales floor and answering questions and being educational with customers. While our job is to make the network connections, talk to the community, become a better resource partner and grow the
Mhm.
business versus managing the
Yeah.
day-to-day operations on the sale floor. And that's kind of why we decided on this franchise, among with the franchise group being so supportive, along with the
Mhm.
franchise network being so supportive.
Mhm.
And I mean, just a lot of great owners in this whole franchise. And from there, obviously 2019, we were able to get our feet wet and understand the industry more hands in depth or in-depth perspectives. And then, of course, 2020 happened and we had to learn how to pivot and be more a
Mhm.
community resource and said, hey, let's
Yeah.
launch an online store so we can support small businesses.
Yeah.
And for every t-shirt that's sold for that business, they get $10. And that
Mhm.
was a great
Mhm.
success, especially since we offered free local delivery during COVID times. And then COVID,
Mhm.
of course, well, the restrictions for COVID let up a little bit better. So we could go back into the store, start offering more in-person services. And between 2021 to basically now, it's been a wild ride of experiences, lots of ups and downs, lots of goods, lots of bads, lots of learning experiences,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
everything that I've done up to this point has pretty much led me to what I'm doing.
Mhm.
Traditional route. I didn't start with a company in college
Yeah.
and stay with them for 30 years, but
Yeah.
I've definitely gone through a lot of self-discovery, self-reflection.
Yeah.
And is this the end game for me? I don't know. There may be something better out there for the person with a web background, with teaching experience, with small business
Mhm.
mindset that can think 1,000 thoughts a second and think of all the risk opportunities out there. I mean,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know, but this is where I am right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know that I've seen you. I don't know if it's just been in our chats on
Mm,
LinkedIn or if I've seen it referenced in some of your posts, but you are very aware of those who are neurodivergent among your staff and
mm,
using neuro-informed approaches in your management style. Can you speak to that at all?
sure. So, as you mentioned, one thing that the neurodivergent community really likes to do is identify others with neurodivergence before they even know
Mhm.
it. And I
Mhm.
didn't realize that we were actually hiring people with the neurodivergent traits until we
Mhm.
actually made that realization and said, yeah, every single person we've hired has had some either ADHD aspects or autistic aspects or anything else. But
Mhm.
we didn't know that going in. We just kind of clicked better
Yeah.
than other people who were,
Yeah.
just answering the questions or trying to put on a good show. And it's like, no, we want
Yeah.
your authentic self. We
Yeah.
want someone who we can easily teach some skills to, but we can't teach personality. And if we click,
Yeah.
then that's definitely better.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
one thing that I've learned in my own experiences, including working for other retail companies, is that most managers really don't care about the employees. They care about the customers. They will do whatever they can to please the customer. The employee is thrown
Mhm.
under the bus. And
Yeah.
they expect the employees to just do whatever they say because they're the boss. And I've been on both sides of that, and I don't like that management style, mainly because,
Yeah.
for
It
one,
doesn't feel good.
it doesn't. And honestly, for
No.
someone who craves the feedback and wants the details and wants to actually go
Mhm.
into why things happen, just being
Yeah.
told, do it because I said so is not really a good
Yeah.
enough reason. Like, I need to know
Yeah.
why this needs to
Yeah.
happen. And so when we started getting employees and understanding their own traits and aspects and details, I wanted to make sure that they were treated with the same respect that we wanted to be treated with. Not
Mhm.
only just because we're, the owners and the managers, but the fact of, hey, if you have a problem, let's sit down, let's talk about it, let's hammer out details, let's make sure that we're on the same page before anything
Yeah.
else happens. I'm not blaming you. I just want to understand the
Yeah.
process,
Yeah.
because if something failed, including me, I want to know.
Mhm.
So my employees are never at fault unless they
Yeah.
royally screw up, which is very rare. But one of the things that I also learned at the casino is when you have your pit boss or the floor manager or whoever is the title of the casino, for us, it was
Mhm.
a floor manager. If there was ever a problem with the dealer and the
Mhm.
guest, the floor would come over and one, go through the 17 cameras above our heads. Two,
Oof.
pull out the cards that exactly were played in the order they were played in and say, here's the proof. Here's what happened. You're an idiot. Go away. And just defending the dealer in that aspect, because the
Mhm.
dealer,
Mhm.
all the 1,000 dealers, they're doing their jobs in
Yeah.
fractions of a second in
Yeah.
multiple instances. And I've never had a manager actually be able to support the person doing the job. And I really appreciated that. And so
Yeah.
when it came to my own employees, I wanted to make sure that they were supported in all aspects. And if a customer actually had a very interesting experience yesterday about this. If a customer does say that the project is wrong or the wrong image was printed or the wrong size was produced, then we have all those processes in place, as we're very good with process management and development, and
Mhm.
being able to say, hey, all of this stuff happened the way it was supposed to. I believe my employee when they said they did it right.
Yeah.
And it honestly came down yesterday to my employee, to a customer calling and saying that she had two shirts and the designs were switched. And for all intents and purposes, my default response was make the situation right. But my employees
Mhm.
insisted that they were right and they did it right. And I'm like, okay, I believe you, but I really don't have enough proof to say otherwise. So what do you suggest we do? And they said,
Mhm.
let me call the customer and actually just, ask and figure it out. And sure enough, one phone call later, the customer didn't check the tags. And in fact, the designs were on the correct items. But again, I didn't want to blame anyone. I didn't just
Yeah.
want to say, the customer's
Yeah.
right and you're wrong. I want you to do this. But
Yeah.
by understanding what they went through, the thought processes, the
Yeah.
reasons, either I can improve our processes, they can improve our processes, we can figure out a better
Yeah.
solution together, or just, find out that the whole process stinks, throw it out. But
Yeah.
one thing that I've also really incorporated is if we're going to have a meeting, such as, hey, I need to speak with you, I
Mhm.
never just leave it with those terms. Hey, we
Yeah.
need to chat. Hey, let's talk later, etc. Because
Yeah.
I'm sure you've experienced the never-ending spiral of bad thoughts of what could happen, to the possibilities, and trying to prepare
Mhm.
yourself to get that
Yeah.
reaction ready.
Yeah.
So if I ever need to meet with my team, I said, "Hey, please meet me in the back. We need to have a chat. It's about X, Y, and Z." And so they
Mhm.
come in prepared. They know what I'm going to talk about, and that's what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah.
Not going off, 10 different tangents, maybe a few
Right.
stories here and there,
Right.
but just making sure that we're all on the same page and making sure that the um, understanding of what I'm expecting, what they're expecting, that we're on the
Mhm.
same page to figure it out is
Yeah.
there, and not just I'm the boss, do what I say, but I want to understand why you're doing things.
Yeah. So you've said several things that I think are so critical in terms of the business environment, but also just people skills and relationship skills. One is obviously respect and wanting that to be a mutual thing. The other is when you said, I want your authentic self, wanting your employees to bring themselves to work and not just step into the role. And then third, your insatiable curiosity is so pervasive throughout everything that you just shared. And really that's a secret to interacting with neurodivergent people. Respect, insatiable curiosity. I love that. Yeah. And kudos to you for managing that way.
Well, thank you.
So
I will say that it came through a lot of trial and error and trying to make sure that what we were doing reflected what we wanted to see.
now for the viewing audience or the listening audience, please go to Big Frog slash Raleigh. Is that it? Bigfrog.com slash.
Officially, it's bigfrog.com/Raleigh-north, but that's kind of hard
Okay.
for some people to understand because technically we have the north side of Raleigh, but the simple version is just bigfrograleigh.com.
Okay. Okay. And so, because we want to support each other, because we do like to click with one another, right?
Oh, yes.
So, yeah. And you do more than t-shirts, if I
Mhm.
remember from our first face-to-face interaction when we were
Yeah.
just, doing a meet and greet. So you have all kinds of merch. What all kinds of merchandise do you offer through your printing services?
Long story short, anything that we can print on, such as t-shirts, hats, polos, towels, koozies. As I like to say, anything soft and squishy, including promo items. So business cards, pins, retractable
Okay.
banners, tablecloths. I mean, pretty much if we can put a name, face, or logo on it, we can print it, just not
Okay.
cars.
Not cars. You don't put skins on cars? You're not going to
Not,
branch out to that?
I mean, the store's only 1,200 square feet, so I'm not quite sure where we can put a garage and be able to do that properly. So right now, we'll stick with what we have.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that sounds wonderful. So I'm just so thrilled that you've stepped into this advocacy space where you're educating people throughout LinkedIn and whatever other platforms that you're doing this on. This is something that I see with a lot of people who've discovered their FASD late in life, because it's so revolutionary to be able to look at your own life with a different lens and for things to make sense. Finally, sometimes for the first time, that we end up with that passion to give back, right? And to pay forward. So I really, really resonate with you, Kyle. What made you pick and choose what you write about each day?
Honestly, just the information that's available. Usually, if I find something that's nice in a graphical format, I will like to share that. Some
Mm,
people have really created some really nice graphics, and I like to give credit where credit is due, if
mm,
credit can be found. But beyond that, it's more of what exactly can I say that I'm experiencing or have similar experiences with and share with the audience.
mhm.
Honestly, there's really no rhyme or reason to the expectation of the schedule, except just to be consistent with every single day. But beyond
Okay.
that, the more that I see and the more that I learn about what's happening, the more that I can relate to myself and say, hey, this actually makes a lot of sense. Now, not
Yeah.
everything that I see makes complete 100% relevancy, but I can at least share it with my audience and say, hey, this also happens. I may not have direct experience with, say,
Mhm.
OCD, but I can still share some of the same skills and
Yeah.
assets. But for example, the post I made yesterday, I think it was specifically about the boomer parents with the whole label aspect. And I
Mhm.
had a theory about that, but I didn't really understand why it was. And as soon as I saw that post, I'm like, hey, this makes total sense. I
Mhm.
have the working theory, I have the experience. My parents are boomers, and they really don't understand why I'm trying to go out and be this educational resource. Because to me,
Mhm.
a label is not just a flag to fly, it's something that I can identify with and understand myself
Right.
better. But again, to
Right.
them, they don't understand that. They think labels are bad.
Yeah. No, it's just shorthand for a whole lot of information.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I had a similar conversation with someone, when I was living in California. We lived in a condo complex and there were a couple kids there and a lot of dog parents, and they gravitated to me. And I think it was just that neurodivergent connection, right? And the little boy, I talked to his mom. I said, and we knew that it's actually her niece and nephew, and we know that there was substance use and alcohol use in her sister. And I offered to run her through the training packages that I do, at no charge even.
Mm.
And she's like, I don't want to label him. And, I kept encouraging her, why don't you get him assessed? And she's like, I don't want him to have a label without, and here's like that boomer mentality, without realizing that his behavior in the classroom or on the playground in itself creates a label. And so oftentimes I find that people, boomers in particular, don't recognize that reality. That only the diagnostic label is the only one that is harmful and needs to be avoided. But the reality is we tend to label things in our society, whether it's a diagnosis or not. So I really appreciate everyone who wants to educate people and help them understand the deeper levels of things.
And that's one thing that I've also found out is when trying to be an educational resource, obviously the ones that I resonate with the most are the people that want to be helped. Those that
Mhm.
just flat out deny it or think, this is not me or anything else. That's not really my audience. For me, my audience is more of people who know a little bit about why they do things or what they're doing
Mm-hmm.
and want to learn more about it and just
Yeah.
being able to provide more resources the same way that I had, but in a
Yeah.
more formalized environment, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, Kyle, one of the things that you posted this past week about was ADHD shutdown. And I
Mhm.
know that's something that we do a lot with FASD also, because a friend of mine uses a concept of porcupines, and it came from her work with the indigenous population. There were a group of little boys that she was working with. They called themselves the Mighty Mice or something like that. But when they got triggered, the one little boy drew his mouse with the hair up on end and it looked like a porcupine. So for my colleague and my friend, it kind of stuck. When your quills are up, you cause disruption in relationships with whoever's around you, right? It can be painful, but you never know what's going to be that last straw and what's going to throw you into overwhelm. And, for which we can react with a quill attack, right? Or we can just shut down and envelop ourselves. Can you talk a little bit about that and what led to, those insights and why you explain things to people the way that you did?
So honestly, I've been experiencing ADHD or autistic shutdowns for quite some time, but I didn't know that's what it was. I
Mm-hmm.
thought that after a certain point of just being pushed too far, of a manager just bearing down on me because they had a bad weekend or something, or a customer just going off the rails or anything else, that I would just get so overwhelmed by everything happening at once
Mm-hmm.
that I would just go nonverbal. And I
Yeah.
would just put myself in a corner of a room and be like, hey, just leave me here for the next 5 hours. I just need to be here. And the more that it happened, the more that people around me didn't understand why it happened. They're just like, buck up and try harder. And it's like, I I can't do that. And so over the many, many years of having those shutdowns and again not realizing what they were, just thinking they're part of everyday life, I realized that there had to be something else out there, that there
Mm-hmm.
had to be a reason that I was doing this, but I wasn't seeing it from anybody else that had similar experiences. And once it, again, to use this concept, once it had a label of shutdown and I started reading the descriptions, I'm like, this makes all the sense in the world.
Mm-hmm.
That by being overstimulated, whether it's sometimes by your own thoughts, but by loud noises or by certain people or by certain actions or any combination or anything else, just something is too much for you and you just shut down.
Yeah, that proverbial last straw.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the fuse is very short sometimes for a lot of my situations. For
Mm-hmm.
example, when my wife and I would go to Costco all the time, there are tons of people at Costco. There are plenty of
Mm-hmm.
conversations, plenty of smells, noises, everything else. And I would just get so exhausted after that, which of course is your social battery. But
Yeah.
then anything that would happen after that, such as if, we would go on a picnic or visit some friends or go to a restaurant, I would just not be there. I would
Mm-hmm.
be so overwhelmed with everything that just happened, plus
Yeah.
expending my social battery, that I just needed time to recover. Not like a full
Mm-hmm.
shutdown, but still needed time to recover for that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's when I realized, hey, I could bring my earbuds and just tune everything else out, have something I enjoy, the good noise. And that
Mm-hmm.
definitely helped me not 100% recover, but it helped me not take in everything around me. I could
Yeah.
focus on either the 5 feet that immediately surrounded me or the destination I needed to go and focus on that, get the
Yeah.
items, check out, not interact with anyone, which I love the self checkouts, and being able to move forward
Yeah.
just definitely helped me. But
Yeah.
sometimes just either the day is just way too stressful. There are too many demands. There are too many noises,
Mm-hmm.
too many smells, too many everything else, including my own thoughts. And sometimes it's just, I can't go on
Yeah.
and I can't
Yeah.
push through it. If I push through it, I'm going to damage myself. And to
Yeah.
me, I thought it was just burnout, but instead it happened
Yeah.
to be shutdown. And in fact, in my fantasy novel, my main character is also undiagnosed with ADHD. Obviously, she doesn't know it, but a lot of the things that I experience, I'm writing through her, including a shutdown in the latter third of the book.
So for that, are you drawing from a lot of your experiences I mean, you were diagnosed as a child, but like you said, you didn't really understand what all came with that until you said, what, 10 years ago?
No.
Yeah. So were you in creating her character or the situations that she finds herself in, were you drawing from those experiences, where you were walking through all these situations without the understanding?
First, unintentionally, yes. When I first started actually diving into the manuscript last year and getting a better version of it, I wrote myself as her just as the adventure would go
Mhm.
on, but
Mhm.
it didn't really click until about 6 months ago when I added a scene where her friends were having coffee and she also joined in on the social gathering. And her friends are saying, "Well, yeah, coffee is great. After this, I'm bouncing off the walls." And she's like, "Yeah, it doesn't do anything for me." And I'm like, "Why does that sound so familiar? What's going on?"
Yeah.
And once I started going through the rereads and the edits and stuff, I realized just about in every single chapter, there's something ADHD related with her that I didn't plan on writing, but it just came out. And so everything that happened, either I had experience in a direct or indirect way, and she's also living it. But
Mhm.
with the fact that she's undiagnosed, she doesn't know the
Yeah.
expectations that go with it. She doesn't know
Yeah.
the challenges. She has a few tips and tricks to help ground herself or
Mhm.
get herself to do something. But again, it's all about the challenges. Now, one of the
Yeah.
goals that I have for the book is to not label her as that. Not
Mhm.
only because I don't want the readers to say, well, she has ADHD, that makes sense, but more of she doesn't know it. The reader doesn't know it. And once the
Mhm.
reader reads the book and understand what she's going through, things should be able to click. And that
Mhm.
way it's like, she's doing that and ADHD has that and that makes total sense now
Yeah.
versus just giving the label and having the prejudice opinion of what's supposed to happen.
Yeah. So are you going, and I don't know if this is a spoiler alert or not, but at the end of the book, are you going to let the reader in on this? That, this character is demonstrating traits of ADHD or that character is demonstrating traits of something else?
Officially, no. Maybe in some side notes or some appendixes on my website or anything else, but
Okay.
directly in the novel, no.
Yeah.
The plan
Yeah.
is for her to be basically as self-discovery as possible and for the reader to
Hmm.
go along the journey.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Another good friend of mine, her book came out almost a year. I guess it's been almost a year, called Embracing Zach. And it takes place, she uses fiction to educate about neurodiversity. So it takes place in a Midwestern town and it's a mystery. One character, well, actually, several characters have FASD. The protagonist does, but that piece does not fall into place until just about until the last chapter. Another character has ADHD, another one has autism, a couple others have PTSD, and there's a special ed, or not a special ed classroom, but a behavioral classroom that is very sensory smart. And the teacher's so popular and it's such a healthy environment for the neurodivergent kids in the school that they will purposely get into trouble so that they don't have to go back to the mainstream class. But it's really, really engaging. And, I think fiction writing, there's a definite place for it to
Mhm.
take people along on these journeys. For my book, Sip by Sip, I've got 12 interviews with other adults living with FASD, all but two of them discovered as an adult, hey, this is, prenatal alcohol had a role in why I am the way I am. The other two were diagnosed as kids, but like your journey, one didn't understand what that meant until parents never shared the information with her until she was a teenager. And at that point, you process things as you do an adult making that discovery. And it's really fascinating how people can shuffle things into place, as they look at themselves and their experiences. There's a definite role for fiction writing in that process as well.
And I'm
So,
sure I'm not the first one. So
yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for your time. I don't want to take up too much more of your day. I don't want to be greedy, but I'd love to have you on again sometime. Thank you for all that you do for for our neurodivergent space in general and the education you provide. And I hope a lot of people will check out the website and order some merch. So, and please let us know too when your book comes out so that we can get that featured and help you promote it.
Absolutely. I appreciate it.
So,
This was a lot of fun. Thank you.
yeah. All right. Thank you so much. I am so glad that you tuned in to today's candid conversation, and I hope you found it very valuable in adding to the breadth and depth of your knowledge about fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. I also hope we made you laugh along the way. I'm so honored to bring you these candid conversations week by week, and I'm so grateful that you keep coming back. You are my faithful audience, and I'm so grateful for you. Please reach out to me at livingwithfasdpodcast@gmail.com. If you have suggestions on topics you want me to cover, that you want maybe to learn more about, or guests that you think would be excellent to invite to be on the show, I'm always happy to get your suggestions. And I'm also happy to hear if any of these episodes have touched your life. Please share your story with me. You never know, I might invite you to come on the show. If you want to pick up a copy of my book, Sip by Sip, Conversations with Adults Living with FASD, you'll find the ordering links in the show notes, along with my Calendly link if you want to schedule a complimentary call to talk about any training or coaching needs that you might have that I might be able to help you with through my company, Kasper's FASD Life Coaching and Training, LLC. Now, if today's guest has given me contact information to share and you want to reach out to them, that information will also be in the show notes. So in the meantime, I just want to thank you again for taking time out of your busy week to watch or listen to this podcast on whatever platform you have found me on. And please, please, please like, subscribe, and share this podcast so that others can find it. That's how they find it, is when you share it. And, the more people that find the podcast, the more people learn about FASD and the less hidden we are. So that's it for today. It's a wrap. Have a great week, everybody. And we'll see you next time on Living with FASD. Take good care.